Yeah.
One more question before we dive into the appreciation stuff. So, Colin, I've changed over Saki Kari growth, colour, and balance. I bought some sinking. What are your thoughts on growth of the fish? Is sinking better or floating? I think I have covered this before, but we'll go for it again. And this actually, I was talking to the sales rep at Ikari earlier, and he was talking about a pond where someone actually wasn't too happy with the staying out of the water was looking with sake, which surprised me. And as soon as he told me they was using sinking, I said, I bet bottom drain's full of it. Now, the thing with sinking food is that it can have some upsides and some benefits. Obviously, one thing you can do when you get them on sinking properly, you can stop the potential damage that comes from them feeding on the surface, which is something I've been victim of a lot this year. It is really, if you can avoid that, because I mean, losing one scale, can be 3 to 6 months of recovery. If it's a nice red scale, especially, sometimes, depending on the age of the fish, it can take even longer to come back, if ever it comes back properly. So you've got to be mindful of that one. And yeah, sometimes fish can be more comfortable feeding down there. It really depends on the pond setup. But the drawbacks, so a lot of professional breeders in Japan do use sinking food. But if we actually look at their pond setups, the ponds are really better designed for using sinking food than ours are. And the monitoring of the ponds is completely different over there. I mean, we're talking obviously ponds that are being observed consistently and constantly throughout the day, as opposed to looking at a hobbyist setup where you're at work most of the day and probably just back in the evening. So if you are, for example, using an auto feeder and you're firing sinking in, how the hell do you know if it's been eaten or not? And how do you not know it's just sat in the drain? Because these pellets are heavy. When it gets in the drain, it can take a long while to actually flush through and just sit there festering and polluting the water in the meantime. Momotaro use quite a lot of sinking food, but them guys literally build this design into the ponds where there's a feeding area. In the big indoor pond that they've got, there's a huge feeding platform, which not only, yes, it's shallower, which is a bit better, but they can literally see what's been consumed from the food fed. And even in some wood ponds that they've got, again, there's a feeding area where the feeder fires onto, where when the ponds are clear enough, they can actually see and monitor what's going off with the feeding. And that's a big difference compared to our setups where, let's say, the likelihood is most of it's going to get fired down the drain. There's ponds in Sakai, for example, use sinking food as well at times, but the ponds are so vast. The area where the feeder's going, the chance of it actually working towards one of the drains in that pond by the time a fish gets it is very, very slim. But like I say, these ponds are being monitored constantly throughout the day, and that's a big difference. So if you're using sinking, I believe the best way, if it's what you want to do, is to do it, but do it on a manual basis, or have it if you're confident you can isolate it within a pond and it's not going to work its way to the drain. But trust me, I've literally watched this when I was playing around with it last year. The 3.5K growing ponds I've got that are 20 foot long with a single drain. I had the feeder on its lowest setting, just dropping into one corner. And by the time the fish had cleared it up, or even sort of figured it out, this was the other interesting bit, the amount of time it took them to get used to taking sinking pellets. Everyone says, it's the way they feed naturally. Yes, carp do like to rummage in the bottom, but they were that used to being fed on floating. When I switched to sinking, I think it took about 2 weeks for them to really get their head around it. And then by the time that point, I sort of left it another couple of weeks. I'd had enough of it, come back to floating. And again, there was a transition period to get them used to that. But weirdly enough, it took less time to get them used to feeding on the surface than it did on the bottom. But going back to what I said, I literally watched the food within a 10-minute span, because the sort of circulation in the system move from the feeding area right towards the drain. And I was literally watching pellets over that time work them way to the drain before the fish had figured out and got to them. And these weren't excessive feeding levels. I had to dial it right back as well while they figured out what the hell was going off. And yeah, just my whole experience was I wasn't overall, and I got straight back to floating as soon as I could. Much easier to manage and control. And if you are, like I say, if you are choosing to use sinking, probably use it as a supplement, or just use it while you're manually doing it. that's where I would go.